This is Marianne from the Alliance for a Better Utah, and welcome to our first installment of the Better Utah Beat. Well, it's been another crazy week in Utah politics. Few issues deserve as much attention as our U.S. Senators' lack of support over the Violence Against Women Act. VAWA is a bill that was originally passed in the 90s, and it comes up every few years for reauthorization. It typically passes with wide bipartisan support. It provides support for women who have been the victims of violence, legal and law enforcement support, funding for crisis centers, and hotlines. The reauthorization typically sails through Congress, not just because it's a really good law, which it is, but also because it's credited with reducing violent crime against women by over 60% since its passage. Sounds like something everyone should be in favor of, right? Well, this time around, despite bipartisan support, Utah Senators Orrin Hatch and Mike Lee both voted against VAWA's reauthorization. In a floor speech, Senator Lee railed against VAWA on the basis of his typical, intransigent states' rights argument, apparently claiming that the federal government has no right to protect women who are victims of abuse. Senator Lee seems to believe that each state is responsible for determining just how much abuse of women is permissible without interference from the federal government, leaving aside the obvious issue that varying legal definitions of abuse from state to state is not realistic. Another clear problem is the rationale that every few states in the country, especially states like Utah, that happen to have a higher than average rate of abuse, have the resources available to manage such programs without the assistance of the federal government. It's unfortunate that Senator Lee feels that the safety of Utah women is less important than his own line in the stand stance against the federal government and his individual, and we might add, somewhat dubious interpretation of the Constitution. Perhaps we shouldn't be surprised, though, given that he also would like to strike down child labor laws. Senator Hatch, on the other hand, justified his no vote on a purely partisan and political grounds, arguing that he couldn't possibly vote for the Violence Against Women Act because this reauthorization provided such unacceptable additions as protecting Native American women who are victims of violence. Perhaps Senator Hatch can sleep better knowing that he voted against this reauthorization over the inclusion of such offensive provisions, but the sad fact remains that if he would have gotten his way and the reauthorization failed, plenty of women across Utah would be sleeping with one eye open. Interestingly enough, Hatch not only voted for the original bill, but also for each of its subsequent reauthorizations. It's far more likely that Senator Hatch's vote was really motivated by his ongoing run to the right in an effort to hang on to his seat. In the end, thank goodness, the reauthorization passed with only 33 senators voting no. It is worth noting that all 33 no votes were cast by white male Republicans. Every female Republican, as well as every single Democrat, voted in favor of reauthorizing the Violence Against Women Act. Good thing that whole war on women is just a figment of our progressive feminist imaginations, huh? In other news, the controversy surrounding this year's state Republican convention is heating up. The Salt Lake Tribune released the details of the Congressional District 2 controversy. Apparently, the new Republican nominee, Chris Stewart, has been accused of planting a second candidate to help smear his opponents and assure Stewart the nomination. CD2 was already a clown car of candidates when tempers boiled over, threats were made, microphones were cut, candidates were escorted off the stage only to rush back on stage. Who says conventions are boring? Finally, a resolution was passed demanding the state Republican Party chair, Thomas Wright, investigate the claims. Wright has yet to complete the investigation, but the evidence of the claim's truth seems to be mounting. Whether or not there is any wrongdoing, the CD2 convention shenanigans are providing some really great political theater. You may want to pop some popcorn for this outcome. Red Meat Radio caught some press this week after Senator Howard Stevenson hosted an entire hour about bullying and the need for protections for LGBT teenagers. The rate of suicide among bullied LGBT teenagers is staggering and tragic, and Senator Stevenson said that his eyes were opened after watching the poignant documentary Bully. While we may not agree with Senator Stevenson very often, this is an important issue that we're pleased to see him support. Way to go, Howard. Now let's hope his new awareness leads to a positive anti-bullying bill from Senator Stevenson next session. Maybe we can even convince him to set aside school vouchers for a year. And finally, Congressman Rob Bishop is in a bit of hot water after he sent out a press release with some glaring contradictions. Bishop is arguing for his bill to forcibly sell off land to the Talisker Corporation, who then plans to build a gondola ride across a watershed area of the Wasatch. While the so-called ski link is supported by those that stand to make a profit, There are far more who have denounced the plan, including Congressman Jim Matheson, Salt Lake City Mayor Ralph Becker, Salt Lake County Mayor Peter Caroon, and the majority of local residents. Here's the twist. In the very same press release, Congressman Bishop complains about the current and past use of the Antiquities Act to designate wilderness lands without, wait for it, the consent of local interests. So which is it, Congressman Bishop, local input or no local input? You can't have it both ways. Until next week, this is Mary Ann from the Alliance for Better Utah with this week's edition of the Better Utah Beat. Have a great week, and remember, together we can make a better Utah.